Welcome to Cube and Chaos. Spend some time with us, enjoying old cards and new, whether they are weak or powerful.
Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? Welcome to another episode of Cube and Chaos. I'm Max.
And I'm Jacob. Welcome.
So, we just finished the Proliferate Cube season, and I think you played more of that than I did, and it sounds like you really enjoyed the format. So, do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the Proliferate Cube was designed by Emma Handy, and it was only online for a week. I would have liked a bit more, but as we'll come to later, I even more wish for it to come back to us like in half a year or maybe a year. So what it was about was, as the name said, Proliferate, which is an ability that puts a counter of each type that is on a permanent or player, another one of these counters there.
When you say a counter of each type, you mean even if there's a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter, you're proliferating both.
Yes, which is a bit hard to pull off since they normally cancel each other out. But if there is a card in there that does both, it puts a -1/-1 counter on the thing and then immediately proliferates. And it can come up that you proliferate both those counters and then they immediately disappear because they cancel each other out. And I mean, this is just an example for how complex this format was. And that is one of the things I really enjoyed. Like, it's a very themed format, so it felt very free in that everything was kind of synergizing with everything. But that also means that you really have to reevaluate cards. And I think that was one of the greatest things about it. And 1 week's not enough to solve the format.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges Wizards has is trying to make the game appealing to like veteran players and beginners, especially in terms of complexity. So when you have a format that is only showing up on Magic Online, which not too many new players use, I think it's a really good niche to showcase those really complex interactions that make Magic such an interesting game.
Yeah, and I think this format not only had complex rules interactions, but also complex card evaluation, but also complex board states could happen, like with onboard tricks, and you really needed to pay attention to what was going on.
Absolutely. Proliferating onto the opponent's ether vial in response to the activation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a thing that came up, almost came up for us once when we drafted together.
Right.
So yeah, it was for me like a lot of fun to explore the interactions of cards. It was very good to read Emma's design article that we will also link, since it just gave a nice insight into what was planned, but also if you are drafting one of those Spotlight Cubes, just read these articles. If the designer of the article tells you that this card might not look so great, but is actually first pick material or near bomb status in this format, just give them some credit to their own format and like pick those cards when you get the 5th pick. You might win your first draft with them.
Yeah. Ideally, the person who created the format knows a little bit of what they're talking about. Though one thing that we talked about earlier is when a format like this makes the transition onto Magic Online, things play out so much differently than they do in testing. And so that is reflected in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. That is true. Though this format was designed for Magic Online. It did not exist as a paper cube beforehand or for other purposes. It was like Emma was tasked or asked if she could design a cube for Magic Online as a Spotlight Cube, and that is what she did.
That sounds like a great job. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm envious, but Emma's great, and I'm glad to know that she got her place in the spotlight, if you will.
Yeah. And one thing that I think you agree with her on is a slight dislike for sweepers, since this cube was very much about the board state, because most of the counters are on creatures, some are on players, a few of them, and a little bit more are on artifacts or other permanents, but really most are on the creatures. So there are very few real board vibes, like there was Black Sun Zenith and then a few damage-based ones. But there was no Wrath of God or multiple Wraths of God in white or something like that.
Yeah, I think there was the one with Awaken, Planar Outburst maybe. I'm not sure if I'm getting that name right. But yeah, you're absolutely right about my slight dislike of Wraths. I think they're appropriate in, especially a lot of the standard Magic Online cubes that we see, standard in the lowercase sense. And I would say that they're also in a really tricky place because you want to be able to make games interactive and interesting at any point. You don't want it to be that the player who's behind knows they're drawing dead before they, see their draw step. But at the same time, you want to make it so that person who worked so hard to get all the creatures onto the battlefield didn't just lose the game for doing that, because generally that is that deck's only way to win. So I really like to try to find this balance by putting 2-for-1s, things that can kill sometimes multiple creatures, or a creature that can enter the battlefield and kill one other thing. Sometimes those cards are incredibly strong, too good for the cube, but I think that generally with formats that are a bit weaker, you don't want to put too many sweepers in, or you're just punishing people for doing what their deck is trying to do, and that doesn't feel good either.
Yeah, it definitely is something to at least think about if they are needed, and if they encourage the kind of gameplay you want. In some cubes, they are necessary for sure. But yeah, just think about what you're doing there. And Emma made a decision for her cube, and I think it turned out well. But that can lead to board stalls, and she specifically also addressed that with some cards. And overall, I think there was some very smart decisions going into building this cube. Though I'd have to say I did have a few small gripes, and the first one is not really her fault. She was tasked to put it at 600 cards. Originally, I think she got later the option to cut it down to 540. They changed their mind a bit with it. But I think 600 is a little bit too big for a cube that is this themed, because at some point you're really starting to run a little bit thin on themes, on the cards that fit these themes, if you want to stay with Singleton. And I think it just made it harder than necessary to build this cube, and it does not give much to it. And with that comes that I felt like it, in some ways, the cube felt a little bit unpolished. And with that, I mean that there are a few cards where I feel like they don't have a home anywhere because they are just too weak. They kind of interact with a few cards, but even then, in my opinion, are not strong enough. But even weirder was, in my taste, are some suspend cards that are in there. And even though they say a counter on them, they don't interact with a lot of the counter synergies that are in the cube, because only very few cards can add or remove. I think in this cube, actually only one, Clock Spinning, can remove or add counters to cards that are in exile. And all of the other things that counters, they just don't interact with suspend while it's in exile. So,
yeah, kind of corny joke, but those suspend cards might as well have the word counter on them as in counter target spell, and it would be comparably synergistic. Anyway, going back to the first thing you said, I think that actually, and this is an interesting idea in my opinion, I think that kind of illustrates a tension between just having a synergistic cube and having a cube designed for Magic Online. Because the idea with a synergistic cube, like you said, is because there are only so many cards in existence that really mesh well with that theme. You want to keep the number as low as you reasonably can. But on the other hand, presenting, sort of the entire world with a cube on Magic Online means that you're going to have the grinders who want to jam the thing over and over. And even the people who aren't grinding it still would like to enjoy a second or third draft. And that means that you'd like to have, ideally, a higher number of cards. So, it finds itself in this really difficult spot where you're either prioritizing the Magic Online audience or the true, synergistic nature of the cube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is something that, in one of her videos, she hinted at that for paper use, she would design a cube normally at 360 cards, since you will not be drafting it as often. And then you can control what is going to happen way better as the designer. So
For sure.
that makes some sense there, especially when you have a theme cube. And I mean, that's just what you did also with your Star Wars cube. It's a very small cube, like a tiny cube.
It is very small. Yeah, I think that's something that's going to come up a few times today. I've been doing a lot of thinking about that and really hoping to return to it soon. But yeah, one of the nice things about that is if I were asked to put that thing on Magic Online, I would have to like more than double it in size to get it to 600 cards. So
yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that while we drafted, stayed away from and felt like it would not be so great is there's an artifact theme in there for a few very powerful cards. Artifact cards that interact with counters, but the other cards then don't really interact very well with the major theme. And we shied away from that. But I heard of some people in our Discord writing that they faced this deck and it was very strong. So I don't know, maybe we misjudged it, but I'm at least certain that at a smaller cube size it would be more potent and would interact with the rest of the cube better.
Yeah, I think that one's a super tough one for me because you have the classic example, Arcbound Ravager, right? You have just a very good counter card that also synergizes with artifacts. And if you have an artifact theme and if you have a counter theme, then a card like that should fit really well. But then the question is, how well do the themes fit with each other? And I don't know. I haven't scoured the cards with the word counter on them well enough to know whether artifacts support. Yeah, I guess.
And I mean, I did also scour her cube list, since in my peasant cube there's a counter theme for one of the color pairs.
Yeah, my biggest gripe, speaking of the artifact theme, would be just a couple cards actually that I saw in one pick during our draft. The Memnite and Phyrexian Walker in the pack. I looked at them and I thought, okay, they're 0 mana. That probably means there's something silly going on in terms of like sacrificing them to achieve some kind of goal, or maybe even a very aggressive game plan. The Walker as a 0/3 probably not doing a whole lot there.
Yeah, the Walker is probably the absolute worst of those cards.
Yeah. And for me, like, those cards are just stone unplayable in any limited format ever. So that's where I had a hard time justifying them.
Yeah, maybe you just really need to want to do that. And then you need to get the good cards also. And then it can be a great deck, possibly. But maybe it's like a meme deck. It's fine to have those in your cube, I guess, sometimes. I mean, you need to fill it out to 600 cards, right?
Yeah.
There were a few other cards that were added late. We will also link the list on Cube Copper, so you can also see from when Emma added which cards, what the process was a little bit. It's a bit hard because it was ported from Cube Tutor to Cube Copper during the design process, but the last steps you can follow on Cube Cobra. In the end, she added the glue cards, as some people call them, like removal, like just interaction in general. But she also added a few just general strong cards for archetypes. And for example, one of these cards was Hellrider, which I know you were a bit surprised to see in the cube.
Oh man, Hellrider. Where do I start? The best finisher in mono red. That's all.
Yes, so we thought a bit about it, talked a bit about it, and it's a super strong card, and it incentivizes you to draft mono red. But I think the card's power level is so great that it kind of makes the theme of the cube disappear a little bit, and it's quite a bit stronger than most other cards, at least standalone. Like if you have all your cogs are really gripping into each other and like your whole engine is working well, then maybe it's not the best card you could have for 4 mana in red, but in very many situations it just is. So that was a little bit surprising to see it in there, but yeah, we will come back to this point later on, so that's why I wanted to mention it shortly.
For sure. I would say just overall, like you said, I think she was a little rushed with this, and I do really like a lot of the underlying like synergistic elements. I think maybe the best way to put this is I think this is the kind of cube I'm really going to love playing in about a year after, there's been some more time to make some tweaks.
Yes.
Really hone in on like the artifact theme, for instance. And yeah.
And it had a very own feel, like it was its own thing, and you need to reevaluate the cards, and it just feels different to other formats, and it was amazing. That's why I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. It's always nice to do something different. I mean, that's why we all come to the alternative play calendar, isn't it?
Yes, that is.
So, speaking of the alternative play calendar, before Emma's Cube, we had Mystery Booster Draft. And this is a format that I was very excited about. I almost want to say because other people were, because I've never played this format in paper. I got so close to being able to go to a GP once and try it out, but unfortunately, I never had, and I know that this format was created to do an impression of Chaos Draft, and that is just super exciting to me, that like creating a curated format to play like Chaos Draft is exactly like that is my niche. So I had really, really high expectations going into this format. I think I should say that up front. Just because I really, really love Chaos Draft. Like I wouldn't go so far as to say it's why I play Magic, but it is what I enjoy most from playing Magic. And this format, it felt like there were some really cool things you could do. I saw a couple really neat, like synergistic things. Like I saw someone go off with like Eldrazi Monument and Sorcerer's Broom, which was really hilarious. And yeah, I think some of the card choices were really excellent, but some of them were a little disappointing in terms of power level, which again, I think we'll come back to in a second, but also actually in terms of the Magic Online playability. So one of the things that I noticed about this format is, so we didn't get an article about this. We got, I think, a couple sentences, and one of the sentences mentioned that there were tweaks for Magic Online. Of course, putting playtest cards from the original Mystery Booster Draft in paper onto Magic Online was not a possibility, so that seems like a pretty obvious tweak. But actually, one of the first cards I noticed on the list was Ana Sanctuary, and Magic Online, while it is the only way I really play Magic these days, it is by no means perfect, and there are a bunch of bugged cards, and I did not expect to see any bugged cards in this list after
Especially
reading that it was
tweeted. Yeah.
right.
What are you doing?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was thinking. And I think frankly they were probably a little pressed for time on this. The fact that we didn't get an article about it, the fact that like they said there were tweaks, but we didn't know what they were. And I was interested in whether sanctuaries were working, so I actually fired up a test game just to find out, and unfortunately the bug is still there. So that was
I didn't expect it to be gone, but
yeah. On the other hand, I heard about a bug with Cypher, the like Dimir mechanic from the Return to Ravnica block, and I hadn't encountered this bug myself, but apparently the bug was that you had to pay full price to cast the copies of ciphered cards.
That makes them not so great.
Yeah. But apparently that bug is fixed. So
yeah, I played with Cypher card and it worked just fine.
Right. And again, I never encountered this, so I can't say certainly that I know it happened, but I can say that, I mean, those cards definitely work. So that's a nice change.
Yeah, I had some fun playing that format, but I didn't quite love it as much as I do Chaos or as I did this Proliferate Cube. Because sometimes there's some really feel-bad games in this, and that for me comes down to them deciding that Soldering is supposed to be a card in this format, and not like at some
add uncommon, no less.
Yeah, I don't even know like how common it is, since like these boosters were like constructed in very peculiar way, where like there's one old frame card and one artifact slot and one land slot or something like that, and then one rare slot and uncommon slots and common slots like normal, but like I don't know, it was complicated and I don't really know what is going on and how often Sol Ring comes up, but in like the 5 leagues I played myself and with you, I did face it twice. And I don't know, that's a bit too much for my taste. That's more than you see it in Vintage Cube.
Yeah, absolutely. Those specific card slots, I mean, first off, there's another instance where having an article about this format would have been a huge help, but we've seen specific card slots work super well, in my opinion, for some formats. Like we go back to topic of the month, original Innistrad, seeing flip cards, like having a slot dedicated to those, I thought was really sweet. However, these slots seemed kind of arbitrary, and they really kind of increased the variance in an exponential way, I guess. And not to mention that it felt like the rare slots themselves, the ones in the upper leftmost part of the draft, just had very, very few cards possible there. Because within the first day, I had seen Drana, the 5-mana 4/4 flying unbeatable card from Rise of the Eldrazi, 3 times. And
I played against that as well.
Yeah, and same for Decree of Justice. And, like, those are not cards you should be seeing anyway, right? Those are cards that one person opens the pack, they draft that card, it's a slam dunk. You don't even look at the other 14 cards, and you just hope you wheel something nice, right?
Yeah.
But instead, not only were these things showing up multiple times, like a very large number of times, especially given like small number of drafts that I had done or seen on that first day, but people had to pass them because there were so many good cards in the packs that you were getting bombs like 4th, 5th, 6th pick sometimes, like completely crazy cards, like especially Decree of Justice, just going like disrespectfully late. And I assume that has to do with people trying to avoid white in the format, or maybe just not knowing how good the card is. But it was very, very strange. Oh, and then the other side of the coin, of course, this is much less impactful on the format, but sometimes I sit down to start a draft of Mystery Booster Draft, and I open up a Sol Ring, and you sit down to start one, and one of your cards, in the rare slot, by the way, is a 1 with nothing. And so kind of going back to that Phyrexian Walker kind of idea, and it's hilarious because I think Memnite was in this format too, and actually I think Ornithopter was too.
Yes, I think they're both in, yes.
Yeah, and it's just like, how do you conceive of people using these cards in a powerful way in their deck? Like, I think that in the original format, there were a bunch of cards that were just kind of fun or cool because it didn't have to appeal to people who just liked Chaos Draft because it wasn't a phantom format. You could put cards in there for commander players, cards in there for pauper players, that kind of thing. But with this format, no one's keeping the cards. And
yeah, that's true.
Like, this would have been a perfect area for some tweaks. Like, if you're getting a Sol Ring, at least give me a Black Lotus. You know? Like, I mean, I say that totally tongue-in-cheek. I don't think either of those cards should be in the format. But the point is, when you just have cards about as far apart as they can possibly be on the spectrum of power level, you create some very, very bad feel-bads. Yeah.
Yeah. But not in every game and maybe not even every league you face like a Sol Ring. And apart from that, I think some games were really enjoyable. Like, they did manage to have a big card pool of cards that fit in multiple different archetypes, and they really built archetype decks in the end. Like,
yeah,
I had
absolutely
a black-green self-mill deck. It was really just doing that, and it was very nice. It was also a bit bomby anyway, but yeah, there still were some very nice games, and I can understand why people like this so much. But yeah, I think basically what you are saying is it could have been tweaked a bit more for the purpose of being played on Magic Online as a Phantom event when it's tweaked anyway.
But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Normally when I do Chaos Drafts, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about synergy because there's generally not much to be had. But this format, I was actually very, very impressed by the amount of synergy going on. Granted, you had some kind of stinky cards. Like, I was going to talk about how I saw like the mono green like dedicated elf deck come together multiple times. But then I also saw Well-Wisher going past 10th pick maybe 10 times or something. So,
yeah.
Right. So I really enjoy that. I would call the themes lighter, even though it feels like they were fairly obvious, just because there are so many cards in the format that the way it shakes out, you really have to do some detective work to see that support for these archetypes is actually there, or you have to get really lucky in opening the right sequence of cards, I guess. But another couple archetypes, like non-tribal ones, I noticed there's actually a lot of support for blue-white blink, and also a lot of support for a green-white kind of aggro enchantment-based deck, which, both of those seemed like really fun archetypes.
The whole Aura Knowledge thing, or?
More like a bunch of Umbras and the 3-mana 2/2 in green and white that draws you a card whenever you cast an enchantment. I think the green and white 6-mana Aura from Ravnica that gives a thing flying, and then when it deals combat damage to a player, you make that many Saprolings. Yeah, there was actually, I don't know if I'm probably forgetting a bunch, but there was more support than I expected for that archetype.
I did draft green-white once, but it didn't look anything like that. It was just green-white with some token go-white support, and that also worked quite well.
Yeah, and that's another really interesting thing about this format. It's totally possible that when they were creating it, they were thinking about green-white as a color identity. And so they just threw a bunch of aggressive Aura cards in there, and they threw a bunch of go-white cards in there, thinking that people could easily see the cards for either or both. Do you want to talk about the pros and cons of having very powerful cards in a format?
Yeah, I was thinking about that specifically, also because we had this feeling with some of the cards in Emma's Cube, but also with here the Mystery Booster draft. And I was thinking there must be some reasons why people do this, and some good reasons. Even though our first inclination was to say, oh, we don't like this. And one of the first things that came to my mind is to say, well, these cards are just exciting to most players, I guess. It's exciting when you open them. You say, yes, I did it. I opened the Soul Ring, or yes, I got past the Hell Rider I need for my red deck. And I think that is one thing that stays with people and that makes Magic exciting in a way. It's part of why Magic works.
Yeah.
You get excited about these cards. For me, I do also get excited if I get powerful cards, especially if they are a little bit more cute and or have to synergize with my deck. I was drafting black-green, I think already pack 1 and pack 2 I opened, or was passed, I think I opened the Gitrock monster, and that was really exciting to me. Sure, it's kind of a bomb, but it stays with you. It's nice to get powerful cards, and the Gitrock monster is probably a much better card than the average common in this format. And yeah, there's a power discrepancy there, but it can be a good thing. One of the cons to that is these cards then they dominate the games they're played in, right? Everything is about them now. Can they answer it? Can they answer it maybe a second time if you have something to bring them back? And once you have the Gitrock monster, why do I even care about self-milling anymore?
Right.
I draw a few more cards, but does it really matter?
That actually takes me back to, I think a draft I had done of Hour of Devastation, and I first picked the Scorpion God, and a couple of the cards in the next pack were, I think, Blur of Blades, the card that puts a -1 counter on something, and you deal 2 damage to the creature's controller, and Lethal Sting. And there were some people shouting at me that I should have picked either of those cards because they're synergistic. And my reply was something along the lines of, when you pick a card because it's good with the best card in your deck, it has to be good outside of that too.
Yeah.
Everything is good with the Scorpion card.
It's pretty good by itself anyway. Yeah.
Right.
But it can be a fun drafting experience to still do that.
For sure.
It might not be optimal for winning, but it still can be great to do it. I also want to shout at you to pick those weird cards.
I mean, you can look up the video now and you can
You
add
can
to
write
the
some angry
comments.
comments. Yeah, maybe I should do that. I heard about this instant on the podcast. What are you doing?
You'd really be furious when you found out that the Scorpion God didn't even make my deck.
Oh, if only you build around it, then yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Then have a deck of 10 red and black cards. Anyway.
And then coming back to these strong cards in like cards that are like heads and shoulders, maybe not quite heads and shoulders, but the head above the rest of the format. Another thing that I was thinking about was that they can just support archetypes, like with micro synergies, I guess, without you having to commit too many cards to them. And maybe a sneak attack would be an example of that. It's a card that changes the evaluation of other cards so much that if it gets opened and you pick it, you can really build a deck around this sneak attack. Might need to have something to actually also draw it, but the card by itself, it makes an archetype if it's opened. And that is one of those drivers for the Vintage Cube, why so many people like that, because there are so many decks in one or two cards can really change the course of your draft.
Yeah. Another really nice thing about that is they play well together. They're not like one or two card decks that exist within this bubble. They overlap pretty nicely. Like if you're interested in a sneak attack, then you're probably interested in like, I don't know, an Oath of Druids or a show and tell. And
yeah,
I mean, show and tell, we can debate whether the card's any good later, but
I would say no, but
yeah, but it feels so good when it works.
It does feel good when it works. And also if you have these cards that are strong in a way, it just increases the variance a bit. Like if cards are roughly the same strength, everybody's more on equal footing, than some cards are just stronger than others, depending on how like important fairness is to you. Like, I mean, for example, from the commander crowd that is defending Soaring in their format, you often hear the argument that it's a casual format and it's fine if somebody gets broken draws. It's because of the game is of no big consequence, and it's still a social thing or whatever. And if you're building your cube and you decide to include some cards that are more powerful than others, and you think, well, it gives everybody a chance to get something broken from time to time and win the draft because of that, not because they played so well. That's an okay decision, I guess. You can make that. But in most cases, I kind of dislike this variance you add.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Another counter argument that I actually heard from NatGo, who's in our Discord, they were talking about how when you have things at a really even power level, sure, you as the cube creator might have strong opinions about what to pick, even at that similar power level. But it makes decisions really difficult for people who are new to the cube. If you look at a pack and there isn't a single card that stands out above the rest, how do you ever make a decision? So,
oh yeah, but I mean, then you just pick what you want to do. If you can trust the cube creator that all cards are roughly equal power level, then you just pick what you feel you want to do at the moment. If you feel like you want to reanimate something, pick a reanimator card. If you feel like you want to play some aggro, pick a red burn spell or a white creature, and then see if it's open or change your position. And it also teaches you to not be too married to your first pick also. If you think all the next 14, if we play with 15 card boosters, if the next 14 cards are roughly still the same power level, you don't have to be married to your first pick. You can still reevaluate freely and rethink about what is going on and what you should be drafting.
Right. For the sake of being thorough, I would say like the continuation of the like devil's advocate argument is like it's really tough to read signals after that first pick too. Because yeah. But on the other hand, and again, specifically for 15 card boosters, it's really hard to like draft a cube where every card is at least pretty good and not end up with enough playables for a deck. Like you can force a deck that's almost entirely not open, and because 45 total cards is just so many to get 23, that you can still wind up with something playable.
Yeah, but it's true that if you have very strong cards by themselves in your cube, or in your set, they send stronger signals. Like if I'm getting pick 1, a 4th pick Hell Rider in almost any cube, that will mean to me that the red aggressive deck is open.
Yep.
If I'm at least relatively sure that this must be the strongest card in this archetype, and I'm getting it late, that's a clear signal. Whereas if I'm getting a few red cards for a while, and then maybe there's nothing in the booster, because boosters tend to be random, especially in cube draft, it's much harder to read the signals.
I mentioned that Innistrad is the set of the month earlier, and it is back. Next year it's coming back in 2 whole sets, but for right now we have a couple events on the alternative play calendar. One of them, which is currently happening, is Supreme Draft, and after that, of course, we will have our traditional triple Innistrad flashback for Halloween.
So that will be next week?
That's right.
Yep.
But in the meantime, we have Supreme Draft, and it's on Innistrad, and that's what we were told. And the first thing that made me think of was spider spawning, because what does everyone remember about Innistrad? What does everyone love to do when the Innistrad flashbacks come around? I mean, people really, really love spider spawning, to the extent that I don't know if I've ever had a good spider spawning deck, because people are constantly forcing it. From what I know, it's the same people who had those great in-store memories that are trying to relive them on Magic Online. But unfortunately, the field is pretty knowledgeable. A lot of people trying to do the same thing. Bit of a hive mind there. Anyway, it sounded to me like an Innistrad Supreme Draft would be the perfect way for people to relive their spider spawning memories by effectively playing Constructed. Just Constructed spider spawning. You play 3 mirror matches against the spider spawning deck, or maybe only 2. And the games probably last 20 turns each.
Everybody's gaining 60 life
from
their Gnaw to the
Gnaws
bones.
To the bone. Yep. You just do really insane things, make LSV proud, and I don't know. To me, it sounds
a bit horrible, but
I think it sounds really fun for about 1 game, not even 1 match, but just 1 game, just to see how things go. But then after that, I think I would be done.
At that point, you can, after the first league, where you played only mirror matches, you can start thinking about how you specifically need to build your deck to beat only this deck.
Start picking the Curses of Oblivion higher to... Yuck.
I don't know, it's at least interesting for a while, but I'm happy we are not playing this format.
Right, yeah. The whole illustration of that was just to say that, we faded that one. We've been given... Actually, another really funny thing about this format. So we've been given Supreme Draft of 4 of the 5 sets on the plane of Innistrad. Which one did they leave out? 4 of the 5,
you say?
Yeah. Do you know which one they left out? Was it original Innistrad itself? Was that it?
Yeah, probably. Probably to not make us have to play spider spawning, right?
Yeah. Nobody liked that set.
No.
Yeah, so they got rid of Avacyn Restored, and just like us just now, it's almost as if they're pretending it didn't exist, because 2 Chaos Draft seasons ago, it was every 3rd set, something like that, of a lot of blocks showed up. And
all the small sets or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But there was 1 small set left out.
Oh.
I know. It's the child on the playground who has no one to play with.
If it wouldn't have been an asshole to everybody at first, then this all could have been avoidable.
Right. From a commander perspective, I think Avacyn Restored is actually one of the best sets, maybe ever. Because there are just so many extremely high-powered mythics, crazy angels and demons, and yeah. So yeah, with that, again, one of the main problems I have with Supreme Draft, just as a creation, is that, in my opinion, the word draft just really doesn't belong in the name. Because the way I think of it, a lot of the people who play Limited play to draft the hard way, right? They play to read the signals, to find out where they're supposed to be. They play for the incremental advantages and the tight technical play. they don't play because they want to play one specific deck. And like that's what Constructed is there for, right? And Constructed is great for that. So I think Supreme Draft is really good at allowing people to play one specific deck. And I actually...
Not even that. I feel like because you can't see what you will get with what will be in these boosters, and the rares really make up so much of the deck in the end. It's pretty random. It's a bit like gambling. I don't know. Like you start down a path and then you really hope to always open a good card in your respective boosters, and you are like, it has some very exciting packs like instantaneous reward, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't like it, but if when you watch it or when you play it, while you're doing it, it is kind of exciting. Just then later on, or when I'm thinking about starting one right now, I don't feel like it. But while I'm doing it, I'm kind of enjoying it, I guess. It's a bit weird.
Yeah. The main thing I would have to say as a rebuttal would be specifically when I think of the Modern Horizons Supreme Draft format, you could see someone say, okay, I'm going to draft the crab deck.
And that was really like that. Because in that format, you have so strong commons that you can rely on getting, that this one really devolved very, very, very quickly into meta games. And but I think with this one, it's a little bit different.
Right. And I think what you said is a fair point. The other half of what I was going to say is someone says, I'm going to draft the crab deck. And from the start of the draft till the end of the draft, their thought process doesn't change. They just draft the crab deck. Or maybe they do the same thing with the ninja deck, right?
Yeah.
But even with only original Innistrad Supreme Draft, you're not guaranteed a spider spawning. So it's not like you can count on getting there, right? The way you can with the commons in the Modern Horizons Supreme Draft format. So I think that's a good response, I guess. Yeah.
So you said that there's something else exciting coming up. Commander Legends, you said, will be available soon?
Yeah, so what I'm not excited about is there is a week-long gap on the alternative play calendar, but I totally understand why Wizards does this. They want to make way for these new exciting formats. I personally, as a player, like having as many options as possible, both in-game and on a meta level, I guess, playing the game.
Yeah.
But Commander Legends, I'm not a big Commander player, but I do actually spend a surprising amount of time thinking about the format. I used to play more before I got really, really into Limited. And I honestly, I'm so interested to see how this format works. Like it's less even that I want to play it and more that I want to know what will happen, and will we be seeing more of this? Like, is this going to be one of players' favorite Limited experiences ever?
Okay, so please, I know nothing about this.
Okay.
Limited, you said. I'm starting to get interested.
Right. So it is a draft format.
Okay.
No asterisk on it, like Supreme Draft. And the packs are 20 cards, so that's a big difference. And pretty much the deal is you are going to build a 60 card deck. And I actually don't know if we have any information about whether 60 is a minimum and a maximum or just a minimum. Because I know in actual Commander, right, you have a 99 card library and then your commander starts in the command zone unless you are doing stuff with partner or whatever. But in this format, I think the only information we have so far is that you make a 60 card deck, which to me sounds like a 59 card library and one commander in the command zone if you're doing it that way. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really know if you would want to go to 61 or 70 or whatever.
Probably not.
Right. But pretty much how it works is we were talking about specific card slots earlier. There are slots dedicated to legendary creatures pretty reasonably, much like Dominaria. It's a format where it's like starting with a companion. sort of, albeit a much weaker companion. And the idea is that there are so many legends that everybody is going to get one. But even if you fall into that nightmare of not being able to get one, or equally awkward, say you end up red-green and you have a legendary creature that's just red, how do you have a commander for that deck, right? Without having that red-green color identity. There's actually a card that's going to function comparably to a basic land. I believe it is a 5-mana 3/3, and what it says is that it's a color of your choice, and it has partner, and it can be your commander, of course.
Oh, I think I have actually seen this card. I think that's the only card I've seen because it has fantastic Seth MacKinnon art, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right. And it's such a bizarre card. It almost reminds me of like the Adaptive Shimmerer from Ikoria, just a colorless 5-mana 3/3. It's not an artifact, not an Eldrazi. But as much as, the words 5-mana 3/3, no real abilities, kind of makes me sick. This card is actually the perfect solution, in my opinion, to this, corner case, but still very real problem of what if you don't get the right commander.
Yeah, that's actually.
And again, nice. Right, and it has partner too, which, like I was saying, so if you end up with that mono red legendary creature in your red-green deck, suddenly you just have a 58 card library in that red legendary creature, and the colorless whatever it is 3/3 thing that I don't remember the name of start in the command zone.
I have another question though.
Yeah.
It's Commander draft. Does that mean it's multiplayer?
Yeah, from what I can tell, it actually is multiplayer, and
wow.
If I'm remembering,
yeah.
I'll have to double check to see whether I have this correct, but I believe you play against people who are in your pod, and I think because it's multiplayer, I think that's it. I think you play like one game, if I remember correctly. I'll have to double check that, but
so it's then 4 players like most of the time, Commander, or?
I believe you split into 2 4-player groups. I think that's the idea.
Well, that sounds very interesting. We talked about the possibility of having a 2-headed giant draft.
Yeah, ironically, that was back when we were speculating about what Supreme Draft could be.
All right. Very interesting. Well,
right.
I mean, we did talk about multiplayer drafts, though, and I think, I'm looking forward to trying this out.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about, and I was really excited about this, so we very briefly earlier in the podcast mentioned my Star Wars cube. And my Star Wars cube is really characterized by a lot of legendary creatures. And so you can probably see where I'm going with this. I really wanted to know if this would be the kind of thing that we could do, like in our Discord. If it would be possible for, I'm not sure about multiplayer games, but at least 1v1, quote-unquote, 60-card commander games. And I don't know the answer to that one yet, but it really just got me thinking, because so many of the archetypes in my Star Wars cube are really, again, very strongly characterized by these legendary creatures. So for instance, you have Depala, the red-white legendary creature that pumps dwarves and vehicles. And just like the perfect signpost commander, not signpost uncommon for that deck. So I would love to see if that could be a possibility for us. But regardless, I'm planning on coming back to this cube. We've gotten through the Double Masters season. So I created an artifact synergy format, then Wizards created it, and then now theirs is gone and we can return to mine.
Yeah, I really look forward to playing that cube again. That was a blast last time.
I have to, while we're on the topic, mention one card that absolutely should have been in the format the first time, because I knew this card existed, but I just wasn't thinking about it, I guess, when I built the format. So it's called Tanos, Urza's Apprentice. It's 1 blue and 1 red for a human artificer. It's legendary, and it's a 1/3. It has haste, and it has one ability other than haste, which is pay a blue and a red, tap it, you copy target activated or triggered ability you control from an artifact source. You may choose new targets for the copy. So just thinking about Tanos with spell bombs is enough for me to say, okay, it's time. We need to draft.
It's time, yes.
Yeah.
Let's see how the draft will go next time. People should know by now that
spell bombs are
spell bombs
pick one.
Yeah, not in every pack, but I could see it.
It would have to be a pretty weak pack, but yeah.
The power level is relatively high, but anyway, it's at least a fun pick one, even though it might look a bit innocent.
For sure.
I think that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this.
Yep. Thank you for listening. Hope that if you're interested in what we were describing, you'll check out our Discord. The link will be right next to this video. Yeah. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.